Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of 2020's The New Mutants. This is the final installment of our X-Men Snicked Rewatch. We went back through all 13 of the Fox X-Men and Deadpool films ahead of Wolverine's Mutant Homecoming and Deadpool and Wolverine in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. This was the final film of the 20th Century Fox X-Men series since Disney bought Fox in March of 2019 and the film rights reverted to Marvel Studios. It was really the end of an era in a lot of ways, but also the end of an era that never really had a chance to get going. Due to a number of factors, it never really was given a fair shake. It had a lot of delays and 5 different scheduled release dates, first to do reshoots, then when Disney finalized its purchase of Fox, and then to make room for Dark Phoenix, and then finally because of COVID. When it eventually was released, fans were just waiting for Marvel to bring mutants into the proper MCU fold. But when you go back and look at this movie, it had solid performances from the cast and a fascinating approach to psychological horror from director Josh Boone, and some crazy ways that it connected to the Fox X-Men films that preceded it. So we gotta break down New Mutants scene by scene for all the Easter eggs, details you never spotted, and what might come back in the MCU. And to celebrate this X-Men rewatch, we have some amazing X-Men themed shirts, from our Xavier Institute shirts to this Deadpool and Wolverine shirt that you can get over at nerdriot.shop or by clicking the link in the description. Okay, in the opening fanfare, Fox, you'll notice, has been removed from the 20th Century logo at the demand of Disney, and we see the in association with Marvel, since Marvel didn't actually have anything to do with this film, but it was still released after that acquisition. But this all means that there's no cool lingering X or X-Men score playing over the music, though this movie does have quite a few tie-ins with the other X-Men films, but it's also the most separate feeling of the ones that came before it. It opens with this narration.
There's an old Native American proverb that says, "Inside every person there are 2 bears. Forever locked in combat for your soul."
This is the voice of Danielle Moonstar, Danny, aka Mirage, who's played in this movie by Blue Hunt. We saw Mirage's name appear back in X2 on Stryker's computer, and one of the students in Charles's class in X1, along with Kitty Pryde and Jubilee, was Mirage, but this is a new version of the character who never attended Charles's school. In the comics, Mirage was a Native American mutant of the Cheyenne Nation, and she has a form of telepathic power that allows her to manifest images of people's greatest fears from psionic energy. She first appeared in the 1982 comic The New Mutants by Chris Claremont, who is the author of a number of the best X-Men titles. Danny's proverb about the 2 bears is the source of her own fear. One bear represents the good in people, like compassion, love, and trust, and the other represents the evil, fear, shame, and self-destruction. Danny's father, played by Law & Order SVU's Adam Beach, wakes her up, and we get this long take of them running through the house as it shakes around them. It's snowing outside, and later we learn that it is the middle of summer, so that doesn't make sense, but the demon bear brings the snow with it when it appears. So in the comics, the demon bear was an entity that haunted Danny's dreams and ultimately wanted to destroy her. It had the power of teleportation and transformation and could corrupt human souls by drawing power from negative human emotions. Here, it seems that it was actually created by Danny, who manifested it from her fear of this story that her father told her when she was little. After the bear kills everyone on Danny's reservation, including her father, she wakes up handcuffed to a hospital bed in Millbury Hospital with Rain Sinclair, aka Wolfsbane, played by Game of Thrones Maisie Williams, staring at her from the vent above her bed. By the way, Rain Sinclair also showed up on Stryker's computer in X2. So Danny went from a violent horror event to a more quietly creepy moment of waking up to just yellow eyes peering down at her from this vent. But Millbury Hospital, in the comics, Nathan Millbury was one of Mr. Sinister's aliases, so we get hints early on that this hospital is not a benevolent safe haven that it's made out to be. There was also a nod to Sinister's arrival in the X-Men Apocalypse post-credit scene with a briefcase that read Essex Corp. Nathaniel Essex was another alias of Mr. Sinister, and in Deadpool 2, the orphanage was the Essex House for Mutant Rehabilitation. Mr. Sinister played a big role in season 2 of the 90s animated X-Men series, and in X-Men 97 was given a very big important role as the origin of Cable's techno-organic virus instead of Apocalypse giving him that virus. So really, all of this is pointed to the fact that they're probably gonna do a live-action Mr. Sinister when mutants come into their full form in the MCU. But the cuff on Danny's hand, you'll notice, has this blinking red light, which could be a wrist version of the power-dampening collars that we've seen in Deadpool and Dark Phoenix and X-Men the Animated Series. We get introduced to Dr. Cecilia Reyes, aka Force Field, played by Alice Braga from Predators and I Am Legend, such a good actress. In the comics, she was a mutant and an accomplished surgeon and one of the good guys, frequently helping the X-Men. Here, her allegiances are on display with this diamond-shaped pin that she wears on her lab coat. This is the same symbol that Sinister has on his forehead, and he uses this to mark people who are loyal to him or brainwashed by him. She lies to Danny, telling her that it was an F5 tornado that killed everyone on her reservation. Category 5 is the highest intensity tornado recorded, with winds between 260 miles per hour and 318 miles per hour. She gives Danny back her bear necklace, which we find out later was given to her by her father so that she can remember when her fear was small. A security camera watches collecting biometric data. On the bookshelf in Reyes' office, there's a skull in a glass box, files, and a bunch of books including Angels and Miracles, Black Sun, Eastward the Sea, Pulling Your Own Strings, and a place called Saturday. Black Sun is a book written by Navajo writer Rebecca Roanhorst, who wrote some Echo comics, but a lot of these other ones just seem like random set decoration. Reyes explains mutants and mutation to Danny and says,
"The man I work for has a way of recognizing new mutants the moment their condition reveals itself. That's how we discovered you."
This is purposely misleading because in the comics it was Charles Xavier who put together the New Mutants, a team of younger mutants who attended his school. Later, when Danny asks the others who Reyes reports to, Roberto says, "Isn't it obvious?" And then he touches his temple the same way Charles always does when he uses his power. So they all assume that when they get out of this facility, they're going to be joining the X-Men. All of this, and the fact that Reyes is usually a good guy in the comics, is designed to unsettle us and lure us into a false sense of security, but it also makes us unsure of who's good, who's bad, and what's real, almost like we're one of the patients in this psychiatric hospital that feels like she is the Nurse Ratched of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest of. In group therapy, Danny meets the others, in addition to Rain Wolfsbane, who can turn herself into a wolf, definitely typecast as the Arya Stark wolf girl of the group. There's also Roberto da Costa, aka Sunspot, played by Henrique Zaga. He can absorb and manipulate solar energy. We saw a different version of Sunspot in X-Men Days of Future Past, played by Adan Kanto, but he's heavily featured in the first 2 episodes of X-Men 97, voiced by Guy Agostini. There's also Ileana Rasputin, aka Magic, played by Anya Taylor-Joy. Ileana is Colossus's sister, and she has the ability to teleport places using the Limbo dimension as a crossing point. She can also manipulate energy, manifest eldritch armor, starting with her left arm, and summon the Soul Sword. We saw her as a young girl in the OG X-Men animated series, and in X-Men 97, Morph briefly changes into her. Here she has the hand puppet of Lockheed, who originally was introduced as Kitty Pryde's pet purple dragon, and later aligns with Ileana in the New Mutants comics. And finally, there's Sam Guthrie, aka Cannonball, played by Stranger Things' Charlie Heaton. He can basically generate energy, which he uses to propel himself or to blast things away from him. We also saw him in the 90s animated X-Men. This basically is the original makeup of the New Mutants team, excluding Karma. Karma was the team's original leader who could possess people, and after she seemingly died, magic came onto the team. At one point, director and co-writer Josh Boone also wanted to have Warlock appear in this film. Warlock is a techno-organic being who could change his appearance and shape, and at some point, Sacha Baron Cohen, I guess, was attached to play the character of Warlock using motion capture, but that was scrapped when the whole thing was deemed too expensive. But then later, Sacha Baron Cohen was attached to play Mephisto for the MCU in Ironheart. That is, if Rebel Wilson's tell-all book doesn't cancel him first. Meanwhile, we gotta talk about Lockheed. Lockheed first appeared in 1983's Uncanny X-Men 166, but first came up earlier than that in number 153 as a bedtime story told by Kitty Pryde to the younger Ileana Rasputin. And the name Lockheed actually comes from the X-Men's modified Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird jet. But Kitty actually meets a different purple dragon on a planet colonized by the Brood and names it after her story character. But this thing is actually a highly advanced extraterrestrial race that's part of the flock hive mind, so it goes on to just be her Lockheed friend and companion dragon. And while the character is more historically associated with Kitty, it does end up bonding with Ileana after she's abducted into Limbo by Belasco, and then he ends up accompanying Ileana when she joins the New Mutants. And I love how throughout this movie, the way Anya Taylor-Joy talks to and responds as the puppet is likely inspired by Danny Torrance in The Shining, puppeting his finger and doing the voice of Tony. Rain tells the group a story about her powers manifesting.
I went to Reverend Craig to see if he could pray it out of me.
In the comics, Reverend Craig Sinclair is Rain's foster father. He thought her powers meant she was possessed by Satan. He fought the New Mutants a bunch before Rain eventually mauled him to death. Later, we see Rain's fear manifest as the scratched up and dead Reverend Craig coming after her in the shower, of all places. Ugh. Danny makes a break for it with Rain in her wolf form running next to her, but before Danny bounces off, Reyes' force field surrounding the hospital in a dome. The wolf who plays Wolfsbane is apparently named Chuck, according to the end credits. Rain talks Danny off a literal ledge, and this is when the two start to become close. A deleted scene would have shown Roberto sunbathing, soaking up the rays that fuel his powers, and Ileana teleporting next to him.
You go meet the fence? Let me know when you figure out how to teleport us to that thing.
I told you not to talk to me.
Another deleted scene would have shown Rain and Danny snooping around Ileana's room later when she's in the shower.
What's up with the puppet?
No one knows. Sometimes, at night, you can hear her talking to it. Put him down, new girl. Slowly.
That night, Danny's vitals monitor switches from normal blue to psionic energy detected pink to psionic energy elevated red, and she has this nightmare about the night everyone on her reservation was killed, and others start living out their own nightmares. Josh Boone said that he originally wanted this film to be full-blown horror and described this as a haunted house story with a bunch of hormonal teens, kind of like Stephen King meets John Hughes. There was a lot of films cited as influencing the claustrophobic, closed-in, and tight-feeling production design as well, like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, The Shining, The Breakfast Club, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors, which has a young Patricia Arquette in it. Most of the film was actually shot in Medfield State Hospital in Massachusetts, which was the state's first mental asylum. Apparently, the cast was kind of creeped out by it and described filming there as uncomfortable, and the crew all had weird things happen to them, according to Josh Boone. As Sam thinks about working in the coal mines with his dad and ultimately losing control of his powers and killing everyone down there, he finds himself back in that claustrophobic moment. The dead miners all stop what they're doing and turn back to look at him, and their faces are obscured by the blinding lights on their headlamps. His bloody-faced father turns to him and asks, "What did you do?" before they all turn their pickaxes on him, and he's blasted back out into the laundry room. And you have to imagine that the laundry room is particularly triggering for Sam Guthrie, because if he worked in a coal mine, he would be constantly laundering his clothes to get that coal dust out of it. Reyes watches Danny on the monitors, and the words "additional analysis required" pop up on the screen. A deleted scene would have shown Roberto hitting on Danny the next day in the cafeteria and her asking him some personal questions.
How long have you been here?
5 months.
Why'd they put you here?
Because the richest people in Brazil can't have a mutant for a son.
In the showers the next day, Danny notices Rain's brand scar, which is either an upside down M for mutant, like Bishop having that scar on his face, and other mutants have had in the past, or the days of future past, or W for wolf, or maybe W for witch, since the Reverend accused her of being one and gave her that brand. Later in the rec room, Rain watches the episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The Body, which is one of the most emotionally brutal episodes of the series, because Buffy comes home to find her mom dead from a brain aneurysm, and it's one of the most naturally depicted deaths in all of television history. There's no music in the episode, it's just quiet and heartbreaking. Something that we didn't ever see in Buffy, because it's just a heightened supernatural world. And this is one death that the Slayer cannot punch or fix. But this was also the episode when lesbian witches Willow and Tara first kissed, which at the time was a very big deal for network TV. This foreshadows the kiss that Rain and Danny will share later, and it's why Rain is just watching this episode with just this longing in her eyes. There's a ton of obvious parallels between New Mutants and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Willow's first boyfriend was Oz, a werewolf, and the show also featured teens with abilities battling supernatural evils. Another episode of the show can be seen later on too, and it foreshadows events that happened right after that scene. Josh Boone cited Buffy the Vampire Slayer as a major influence on the characters of Rain and Danny, stating, quote, "I wanted to do what Josh Whedon did 20 years ago in Buffy and have a gay romance, a real gay romance. It works so organically with the material in the comic and the way these girls interacted. In the comics, before the film came out, Rain and Danny were just good friends, and their sexuality was never outright stated." We want to thank Geology for sponsoring this video, but also to thank them for making sure we look camera ready all day, every day. Geology is a 29-time award-winning skin, hair, and body care company recognized in Men's Health, Oprah Daily, Hypebeast, Birdie, Esquire, and GQ. Geology's products use just a handful of powerful, proven ingredients that have been trusted by dermatologists for decades. If you don't know where to start, Geology can create a simple and effective skincare or hair care routine for you. All you gotta do is take a quick 30-second quiz. Geology can help you fight acne, reduce oiliness, prevent wrinkles, combat dark or puffy under eyes, have smoother, hydrated skin, and target signs of aging. Right now, if you use code NEWROCKSTARS100, Geology will give you 100% off their award-winning skincare trial set. You'll also get an additional bonus offer of up to 30% off one skin, hair, or body product when you add it to your trial. That's 100% off plus an additional 30% off. That's a lot of off. Just click the link in the description or go to geolog.ie/rockstars100 to get started. After calling Danny Pocahontas earlier and asking what kind of Indian are you, Ileana just lets racism keep on rolling by calling her Standing Rock. And Standing Rock is a reservation on the border between North and South Dakota and was the site of many protests against the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline. So Danny and Ileana throw down, which lands them both in solitary, an even more claustrophobic setting in an already claustrophobic place. Ileana tells the Lockheed puppet that they'll go to their special place where the smiling men can't get them, and she has this image of being a child hiding under the covers as an unnaturally tall, thin Man wearing a smiley face mask finds her. In the comics, the New Mutants fought a mutant supremacy group known as the Right, and they all wore smiley face masks, so there could be some parallels to that. In Danny's cell, snow starts to drift down before the snow turns into drops of blood. And on Reyes' monitor, the words "anomaly detected" flash on screen. An extended version of the scene showed a face trying to press through the wall in Danny's cell, which is a move straight out of the original Nightmare on Elm Street movie. After Reyes finds Danny covered in blood, the monitor screen reads, "Analyzing psionic event data, psionic energy levels elevated for 48 hours, mutant powers undetermined, collect blood samples for analysis, observe interactions with other subjects." Yeah, she's getting all these instructions from someone. We'll figure out who that someone is later. As Reyes draws her blood, she compares mutants to baby rattlesnakes that don't know how much venom to secrete, making them the most dangerous.
Even the mutants we call heroes today, when they first got their powers, chances are they hurt someone. That's why new mutants are dangerous.
I'll talk more about what point in the timeline I think this movie falls into later, but Reyes could be talking about any number of people here in this line. Jean Grey, Cyclops, Rogue, they all messed up people at some point when they were still figuring out their powers. Reyes continues her vague misleadings of who she is working for.
My superior runs a facility for gifted mutants. You could move there after this if you wanted to.
Again, using the word gifted here to make it seem like she's talking about Xavier's school for gifted youngsters. Rain goes to the chapel and does some confession, despite there not being a priest in this confessional booth because Catholic habits are just hard to break. Her fear manifests itself as a non-corporeal Reverend Craig coming into the confessional and yelling at her that she's a witch and he'll flay the flesh from her bones. A deleted scene would have shown Roberto's power manifesting while he and Sam play basketball.
Whoa, stop. Hey, what's up? Just a timeout. I need to cool off.
But the teens sneak into the attic where the youth are sick and there is no cure is spray painted on the brick wall. This is kind of reminiscent of the way the head of the orphanage in Deadpool 2 would say the words, "Blessed are the wicked who are healed by my hand," before torturing young mutants. There's this idea that being a mutant is an illness that can be cured that just pops up again and again throughout all these films. Ileana straps each of them to a lie detector test to ask them some embarrassing questions. And one of these probing questions goes to Roberto, asking his sexual history. And when he says he's been with 3 women, that registers as a lie as well, because we know he's just been with one, and when he got too hot, he tortured her to death. Later, she drugs Reyes' tea and the group sneaks around the hallway and then dances and parties, which is definitely very John Hughes Breakfast Club, and Ileana is definitely the Judd Nelson of this group. They talk about who might really be running this place.
Isn't it obvious? You know who the X-Men are, right?
Yeah, why would we want to be X-Men?
So this is obviously at a time and in a timeline where people know about the X-Men and they are just like an organized team of heroes that people might aspire to join. On a bookshelf, there's a DVD box set of Buffy, which explains why they're always watching it. At this point in the movie, everyone's teen hormones kick in. Rain and Danny kiss under the force field during a thunderstorm, and I love how the red circles formed on the force field creates just this really cool visual that evokes Cerebro in X2 when Charles Xavier located all the mutants and they were cast in the color red. It's kind of like these kids are realizing that they're not alone. Meanwhile, Roberto hooks up in the pool with someone who he thinks is Ileana, but it's actually just a manifestation of his fear. His dead girlfriend, who he burned alive when they were getting hot and heavy, and his powers kicked in. An extended scene would have shown Reyes scolding them for insubordination and telling them how disappointed she is.
As of today, we're on lockdown.
Reyes sedates Danny to perform a series of tests on her, and then we get one of the most significant tie-ins to the larger X-Men universe.
Where are you?
I'm right here, Gina.
What is this place?
So that is footage from the 2017 movie Logan, specifically the cell phone footage that was recorded by the nurse in the Transigen facility in Mexico, where they were creating the young mutants using DNA taken from other X-Men like Avalanche and Bolt and Wolverine. This was years after the naturally occurring mutation had mostly been wiped out, and you can actually see Daphne Keane, Laura, a few times in this footage. So technically, X-23 Laura is in this New Mutants movie. So the New Mutants movie never specifically states when it takes place, but the Logan movie was set in the year 2029. Josh Boone said that his original intention was for this movie to be set during X-Men Apocalypse in the 1980s, and it would have actually had cameos by James McAvoy, Charles Xavier, and Alexandra Shipp Storm. Again, remember, this movie was conceived right after X-Men Apocalypse, before Dark Phoenix in the 90s came out. But Josh Boone said that that idea was nixed, and instead, the film was set in the present day because Marvel wanted the X-Men to be brought up to the MCU's current regular timeline. The fact that the teens said earlier that once they get out of the facility, they might be able to join the the X-Men, it implies that at this point the X-Men are still around and active. So it's not all the way up to when Logan was happening. They also specify that they think Charles might be Reyes' boss just by doing that motion, so they know who Charles Xavier is. In the events of Logan, the public at large was led to believe that Charles and most of the X-Men died about a year before the start of the Logan film. So the most likely explanation for when New Mutants is set is somewhere between the events of the final scene of Days of Future Past in that restored timeline that was 2024 and the events of Logan in 2029. And maybe what Dani is seeing here in this moment is a glimpse into the future of the company running the facility that she's currently in. Basically, Simon Kinberg's intention for all these later X-Men movies was that this would all be set in a timeline after Days of Future Past. Like in 1983, we saw the Essex Corps stealing X-Men DNA, and that would be what led to Logan when they were experimenting on mutants in the future, and that this is just in a revised timeline where over decades they started toxifying the food and water supply, and that mutants started to die out, and they started to do stuff like experiment on kids in Mexico and take some other kids and put them in this psychiatric center where Dr. Reyes is working for Mr. Sinister. And like all of them are working for Mr. Sinister, and we just didn't get a chance to see him yet because Disney bought the franchise. But sedating Dani was a terrible idea because more nightmares began manifesting. We see a mauled Reverend Craig branding Rain in the shower, and then the smiley face men continue to stalk Illyana, who gets so pissed that she drags Dani into limbo. She later tells Dani that when she was little, men hurt her and other children, and they smiled while doing it. So we learn that Illyana was sold into sex slavery as a kid, and that is pretty heavy for an X-Men movie. But it creates this interesting trauma creates reality context for this movie. Like, it's implied that the entire realm of Limbo was something manifested through Illyana's torture. Meanwhile, Reyes gets a message on her monitor reading analysis results for Moonstar Danielle. Subject presents extreme danger. Collect additional DNA samples. Terminate subject. And then the message signs off with Essex Corporation. And the logo is the diamond that Mr. Sinister has on his forehead and in his chest. And it's the same pin that Reyes wears. She straps Dani to a table because they're down a hallway into a creepy room. And then we get the other Buffy shout out of this movie as the TV now plays the season 4 episode Hush. I think between Hush and The Body, the best 2 episodes of Buffy, in my opinion, are represented in this movie. So Hush was completely awesome. It was a mostly silent episode that was nominated for an Emmy. The villains of this episode were the ghoulish, grinning creatures in black suits known as the Gentlemen, who stole people's voices and have a lot of physical similarities to the Smiley Men, who once again go to terrorize Illyana. The scene that we see on TV here is specifically when Buffy manages to get her voice back to destroy the Gentlemen and their creepy, mindless servants who wear asylum straitjackets. Illyana sees the Smiley Man, who takes off the mask to show his demonic face with no eyes, but he's got some Russian prison tattoos on his chest. And I love this detail because it implies that she would remember the details on his chest but not his eyes, because she would never look into their eyes and only look at their tattoos. Reyes justifies what she's doing to Dani by using another animal metaphor that sometimes the most humane thing to do with rabid and feral dogs is to put them down. But she immediately gets some poetic justice when Rain drops down on her from the vent and mauls the shit out of her. So the image of Rain in the vents at first was creepy for Dani, but now we realize it was all to set up this moment when she would drop down to be her salvation. As Reyes cuts her bleeding, messed up face, her sinister pin falls to the floor, almost like it's telling her, you picked the wrong side, dick. Dani is drugged and freaking out, so all hell breaks loose and everyone's greatest fears start manifesting all at once. A whole bunch of Smiley Men show up and overtake the place. The kids fight back. I love how Sam cannonballs through a few of them. It's wild to see one of those Smiley Men's top halves after it's been severed just still twitching and rolling around on the ground. So after it seems like Illyana retreats into the limbo, she reappears now with the soul sword, slicing their asses up, and whereas her enemies have no eyes, the blue glow from her sword now also glows from her eyes, because before she was blind, now she can see. Illyana finds the file Reyes has been keeping on her, and in case it's not clear what's up, we get this exchange.
Essex Corporation.
She wasn't prepping us to be X-Men. She was prepping us to be killers.
Reyes uses a force field to smother Dani, causing her to pass out, and the Demon Bear shows up, chows down on Reyes. It's a wonderful moment that evokes Sam Jackson's death in Deep Blue Sea, but we see one benefit of the various delays of this movie. It was originally set to be an April 2018 release, and then August 2019, then April 2020, then August 2020, which I guess did allow time for VFX animation to make this look this good. Like, yes, the Demon Bear is a surreal specter, but in this moment, it is lit solely by that dangling laboratory light that just strikes the snow that comes with the Demon Bear and its fur on its snout, just enough to give the visual effect its proper shape and its dimension, and the glowing red eyes just do the rest to make this a fearsome beast that they have to fight in this final act of the movie. And as she powers up, we get the shout out to Illyana's superhero moniker.
Are you crazy? That thing will kill you!
He's right, it's magic.
So am I.
Then she fights a demon bear, and she imagines Puppet Lockheed turning into the real Lockheed. She greets Demon Bear as Yogi and says,
"Lions and tigers and bears, oh my."
Of course, nodding to the picnic basket stealing cartoon bear and the Wizard of Oz. And I gotta say, this fight with the demon bear, it's just really fun to watch. There's a moment when Illyana and Lockheed attack it in a church, and it briefly is transported into Illyana's home turf of Limbo, with the red sky of Limbo giving us its context in its full size. And for once we think, hey, this isn't just a cloud that we can't fight, this is an actual animal that can be slayed. And this is what encourages the rest of them to step up. Roberto fights the bear, powering up a sunspot. Rain goes full Arya Stark on this thing. Meanwhile, Dani, down trapped in her own subconscious, is convinced by her dead dad to wake up, and she confronts the demon bear, facing her fear, and it dissipates, and she takes off the bear necklace, symbolizing her release from this fear. The group walks away from the facility together, and we end on Dani's closing narration, circling back to the idea of everyone having two bears inside them, but she finishes this fable.
I asked him, which one wins? He answered, the one you feed.
Honestly, what a great ending and a pretty solid film overall. New Mutants comic artist Bill Sienkiewicz did a bunch of cool illustrations that played over the end credits. Now, originally Josh Boone wanted a post-credit scene that would include a proper introduction of Mr. Sinister with John Hamm in talks to play the character, but when it became clear that there would not be a sequel, that idea was scrapped, and so there was no post-credit scene at all. Before Disney bought Fox, Josh Boone intended this to be part of a trilogy, with the second movie being an alien film featuring Warlock, and the third being based on the Inferno comics run, but those plans were also scrapped. But think about it, Inferno? We just got that on X-Men 97, and we could have gotten a Madeline Pryor Goblin Queen movie, but alas, it was never meant to be because the mouse bought him out. But we are getting Deadpool and Wolverine. That does it here for our X-Men Rewatch series, but first let's enter the danger room for theories and possible spoilers for Deadpool and Wolverine and what the MCU might do with the New Mutants. They have actually a pretty good opportunity here. Anya Taylor-Joy's star power has only risen since this film. She just showed up in Dune Part 2, she was in the menu, she's basically eating Sophie Turner's lunch. She's actually someone I really think audiences would show up to see continuing to play Illyana Rasputin magic in the MCU. Her link to the realm of Limbo could be a pretty easy way to pivot her into the MCU, because the MCU has established all kinds of realms that visually don't look that different from Limbo in this movie. So we have one final bonus installment for this X-Men Rewatch series in which I'm going to rank all the movies and explain how, despite how disconnected especially some of these later installments were, they still represent a fairly linked creative strategy by the Fox studio that makes, I gotta say, more sense than Marvel has done in phases 4 and 5. And we gotta analyze the lessons that these studio execs have learned as they seek to bring the mutants into the MCU. I wanna offer a huge thanks to Gina Ippolito for writing this analysis and her help with all of these installments of our X-Men Snaked Rewatch. And thank all of you for joining us on this journey as we prepare for Deadpool and Wolverine. You can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at EA Voss, follow New Rockstars, and subscribe to New Rockstars for more analysis of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.